Hello and welcome to the Run Testers. My name's Nick and this is our full review of the Hoka Challenger 7. So the Challenger 7 is a road to trail shoe or an all-terrain shoe designed to be capable for both your road and light trail runs. It's got a little bit more road focus than the previous version of the shoe, but it is still designed to work well on both the road and the trail. It costs £130 in the UK, $145 in the US. It has a 5mm drop and the men's stack height is 31mm at the heel, whereas it's 29mm at the heel in the women's. It's actually a rise of 3mm for the women's shoe and 2mm for the men's shoe compared to the previous version of the Challenger. It weighs in at 257 grams or 9 ounces in my UK size 9, which is pretty light given the high stack of foam here. That's because it's Hoka's compression molded EVA midsole, which is a very light midsole, not necessarily always the most responsive and dynamic, but it has been tweaked in the latest version of the Challenger to be a little bit softer than on previous versions. The upper is also a little bit softer now. It's still a mesh upper, but it fits the foot a little bit more closely, and there's not so much going on in the way of protection that you might find on trail shoes. There is a little bit of a toe bumper, but nothing too significant. There's not a huge amount of structure either around the midfoot, but you have got a internal heel counter there to provide some support at the heel there. The outsole has been redesigned as well. It's got 4mm lugs, but these have been changed. So in the middle they're a bit flatter and smaller to create a smoother ride on the road, whereas on the outside they are that little bit longer and more jagged to try and bite in and provide grip when you are on those light trails. Overall, the changes probably will make the Challenger a little bit better on the road, hopefully without really affecting its performance on light trails.
Fit for me then, I ran in a UK 8.5, which is true to size, that is my size, and I found them okay, though one word, they do come up quite kind of snug fitting, they are quite close fitting, certainly sort of, that's nice kind of in the heel hold with this kind of big padded kind of heel collar and cushioning around the heel collar, but they were also a little bit tight across the middle here, and there's not a great deal of room in the toe box, so when you put them in, the overall feel is quite snug and quite kind of compact. You obviously can get these in a wider size if you want to, and maybe if you like a wider shoe, you've got wide feet, that might be something that you would go for. But yeah, certainly quite a sort of snug fit, but I would recommend going true to size.
On the fit of the shoe, it's worked very well for me true to size, but I have a fairly narrow foot, and I do think the Challenger has quite a tight and snug fitting toe box in particular. There is a wide version of the shoe available, but if you have struggled with Hoka's toe boxes in the past, there's going to be another shoe I think that is a little bit too close in the toe box, especially for those longer runs.
So on to the run test. I've done about 25 miles in these shoes on a mixture of kind of road to trail, lots of compacted kind of river paths, which can get a bit sloppy and a bit muddy, a bit wet, sort of through puddles. I haven't done anything particularly kind of steep and technical and tricky. So we're not talking about anything kind of like coastal paths or mountains or that kind of terrain. So I haven't really given the grip and that kind of downhill sort of traction a really thorough test. That's one caveat here. I'm talking about things that are probably quite well groomed and not too tricky. Now with that in mind and some of the key details here, you've obviously got this kind of higher bed of softer midsole foam than something like the Torrent. The Torrent sits kind of a little bit lower, a little bit more sort of close to the ground and put something a little bit firmer underneath. The idea here is with the Challenger, you've got something a little bit more plush, it's going to absorb a little bit more impact. I guess going to be a little bit more forgiving on road and on trail. It's also slightly lighter than the Torrent. It's got a lower drop by a mil than the Torrent and the Speed Goat. The Speed Goat is supposed to be a little bit more responsive by comparison to this shoe. So what you're getting really in the difference, I mean, that's my one question here is whether or not this shoe really offers that a huge amount more than those two shoes in terms of you getting that kind of plushness. And I don't think it's not a massive difference. My one question when I pick up the shoe is like, why have we got another shoe from Hoka that feels like some of the other shoes? Do I like it as a shoe on its own? I thought it was perfectly fine. I ran really well in it. I enjoyed the ride. I enjoyed the sections that I did on the road where I did feel like it kind of soaked up enough of the ground. It's not a dull shoe, but it's not that lively. I mean, the rocker does a certain job of rolling you through sort of happily at a certain pace. You know, I think sort of my easier clips when I'm running at kind of easier miles, again, just enjoying myself and out and rolling rather than anything particularly faster. I really sort of felt the shoe, that's where it was at its kind of sweet spot, was just sort of rolling through the forest paths and on the road up there. It coped with the road really nicely. I do think it put a nice kind of layer of protection between you and the road. It doesn't really have much oomph when you want to sort of take things up a notch though. Perhaps that's not really what it's designed for, and that's where you sort of go for the Speed Goat, or you go for something a little bit more responsive. For me, the fit is quite tight as well. There's not a huge amount of room in the toe box, because I was going to say one thing that I thought maybe for this shoe, so the kind of shoe that I'd put on and do a long ultra. When you're going from road to sort of the trail, you might be doing some ups and downs. You're going to need a little bit of grip, but you're not going to be going through kind of anything that's too slippy. These 4mm lugs do a sort of perfectly good job kind of on most of the terrain that I've got. And I always say this in the videos about these shoes, you know, it's the kind of rolling ultra that you might encounter here in the UK if you're doing the North Downs Way or the South Downs Way or any of the Threshold series or Maverick trail runs, those kind of runs where it's not going to be technically that challenging, and you want something that's going to be able to switch up nicely between the road and the trail. I feel like this shoe might do that. The only caveat to that is I think that narrowness in the kind of toe box over longer miles is something that, you know, I feel like there's a little bit too claustrophobic in there for that. I'd like them to be a little bit more roomy if I was going to go longer than, say, sort of 30 miles or so in them. That said, you know, I found the hold, you know, the cushioning, they are a nice plush shoe. When you put them on, they are pretty comfortable. They've got a pretty decent kind of disappearing feel on the foot, and I clipped along happily in them on all my runs. I enjoyed the kind of the ride overall, and they're a very easy shoe to put on and kind of move along the trail in. Are they better than the Speedgo? Are they different enough from the Speedgo? I'm not sure. If you already own a Speedgo, I don't think these add much more. I don't think they're going to get, you know, if you're thinking about adding in a shoe into your rotation in addition to the Speedgo that gives you a bit more cushioning and protection, then I don't think these are that different really. I would just stick with what you've got. They're definitely a little bit softer than the Torrent, so if you find the Torrent a little bit too firm and you want something that's slightly softer and a bit more forgiving, they are more of that, but again, it's not, I don't think it's a huge significant difference. So yeah, overall on my runs, I would say pretty good in terms of just being able to clip along happily at an easy pace. They're pretty comfortable on the foot. They've got a good hold, you know, no rubbing, no problems with that. A little bit tight in the toe box. If you've got wide feet, that might be a problem.
So I've run around 50k in the Challenger 7 on a nice mix of mostly quite light trails with a few stints on steeper grassy sections and then a fair bit of road running in it as well. It actually arrived at the perfect time. We had a snow week in December here in the UK, and most of my runs that week were just easy runs trying to negotiate icy pavements into a forest where the trails were hard packed snow, and this grips really well on them. It's really well designed for that kind of terrain. I know big problems with gripping. You know, some of the icy pavements, it didn't grip that well, but nothing, no shoes really would in those kind of conditions. But in the forest, it gripped nicely on the snow, even when it was quite hard packed and slippery. So that was a good first impression, and I've maintained that good first impression in terms of grip. I've taken it into some deeper muddy sections in the forest, and it's gripped okay. You know, it's not great in really boggy ground, but on the main trails, which are muddy at this time of year, it's fine. You can still run around them pretty much at any speed without any concerns about grip. On some steeper grassy sections, it's not the best gripping shoe for that kind of terrain. You will want more of a dedicated trail shoe, but yeah, overall I think the grip's been quite good, especially when you consider that it does run very smoothly and comfortably on the road as well. I've not had any skittishness from the lugs on slippery pavements or even those slightly icy pavements, so it is a good versatile outsole that can handle a nice range of light trails, keep it away from very deep mud or grassy hills, and it's going to do quite a good job, I think. I'd say the only terrain the shoe wasn't that at home with in terms of light trails was when you're on kind of very uneven ground, so rutted ground, especially when it's frozen and there's quite narrow or small landing points. The shoe just felt a bit big and cumbersome on that, so that's part of the fact it's got that big midsole there. But there are Hoka shoes with big midsoles that are a bit nimble on that kind of terrain, like the Torrent or even the Speedgo actually. So yeah, it's not really designed for those slightly trickier trails, but it can handle them in short spells. But if you're on them for a long period, I'd be looking at a more trail focused shoe. In terms of the ride, the cushioning is nice for easy runs on the trails. Like, the foam isn't the most exciting in the world. It's pretty much a classic Hoka EVA, but on the trails that's fine. It's stable, it's comfortable, you can go long in it without any concerns, and it is still quite a lightweight shoe. So I did a fartlek session in the forest running kind of 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 minutes on with a minute off, a couple of sets of that, and it's a good shoe for that when you're not, you know, directly focused on hitting a certain pace goal. You just want to run fast, and especially on mixed terrain, it does a good job because it is quite a lightweight shoe. It picks up reasonably well. It's not responsive or giving you a load back, but it's not really getting in your way either. Like, at the same time, I wouldn't be a shoe that I'd want to go and run hard road sessions in where I was trying to hit K reps at a certain pace. It's not that exciting. The midsole doesn't have that much response, and for road running, there are loads of great road running shoes that will do a better job of that, but yeah, on that kind of session, it was a great shoe for the job because I was on slightly muddy, slightly icy patches in the forest. Did a good job of gripping while still being light enough that I felt I could push the pace pretty comfortably. So I think the midsole is great for the light trail stuff you're doing the shoe, but I think it does lack a little bit if you are using it very much as a shoe where you're split equally with road running as well, just because there are so many great road shoes out there that do have a more exciting ride, a bouncier ride, a more comfortable ride, just better rides in various ways. And actually some of them, like the Puma Velocity Nitro 2, have great outsoles too, so they can handle a lot of the same light trails. So the fact that the midsole isn't the most exciting isn't normally such a big problem for trail shoes for me, because you're just looking really for stability and a bit of ground feel. But if you're going to be using this for extended periods on the road as well, it will be lacking compared to the feeling you get from the best road shoes. So I think the Challenger 7 is a very strong road to trail shoe. I think it stands up very well against my other favourite shoes in this category. It's a bit lighter and faster than the Nike Pegasus Trail 4, which is very comfortable on the road, but is a bit more of a cruiser of a shoe. I think the Challenger is almost as comfortable on the road, whilst having a bit more about it, having slightly better grip on the trails and being a bit lighter and better for fast stuff. The Innovate Park Claw G280 is also a heavier shoe, but has better grip than the Hoka, and I think it's also it's got probably a slightly more exciting midsole. I prefer the feel of that shoe when running fast at times. The Puma Fast Track Nitro, I think, is a more dynamic shoe. It's a better shoe for speed running. It's a firmer ride than the Hoka, though, and if you're doing extended periods on the road, I think the Fast Track Nitro is not as comfortable as the Hoka Challenger is, but on light trails, it grips really well and is a nice fast trail shoe, the Fast Track is, while still being pretty comfortable for short spells on the road. There is a fair bit of overlap within the Hoka range, though, which is muddying the waters a fair bit. The Challenger is billed more as the all-terrain road to trail shoe, but there are trail shoes in the Hoka range that are pretty comfortable on the road for extended periods. There's the Speedgoat 5, which I think is a fantastic shoe, really lovely, comfortable ride that flows very well and is pretty fast as well. The Torrent 2 I find just a bit nimbler and more agile on technical trails and a bit faster as well, and I've enjoyed using that shoe for long spells on the road in the past as well. So there's a lot of overlap here, and I think the Speedgoat is a more accomplished trail shoe, especially for longer runs. I think the Torrent, I think, is a more enjoyable shoe for faster trail running and short trail running. So I'd probably pick them ahead of it. I mean, maybe the use case scenario for the Challenger would be that you're veering more towards 70 or 80% road running with regular stints on the trails, but it's the minority of your running, in which case the Challenger is more comfortable on the road than the Torrent and the Speedgoat. But then if you're in that situation, I think there are lots of great road shoes that are more comfortable and fun to use on the road than the Challenger 7, that then have enough grip to use on lighter trails occasionally. Things like the Puma Velocity Nitro, any of the Puma range actually, really. The Velocity Nitro 2 is a great daily trainer. Deviate Nitro 2 has great grip and is a great all-rounder shoe with a plate in it for fast running as well. And then even the Nike Pegasus at 39 has a pretty good outsole that can handle light trails. So yeah, it's a hard shoe to necessarily recommend. It's quite a good jack of all trades, and if you're a one shoe runner who just wants a pretty solid shoe that can do a bit of everything in terms of terrain and different paces, it is a solid option. But if you're someone who has a rotation, it's hard to fit in, because there are shoes that I prefer using to it for every single kind of run. And even as an all-rounder shoe, I think it does have a lot of overlap of other shoes from Hoka and other brands that make it hard necessarily to recommend the Challenger. But at the same time, it is a good shoe. It will do a lot of things quite well. You can have it around and use it for all your runs pretty comfortably. It does do a solid job of lots of stuff. It just doesn't really stand out in any one way. So it's not really one that I think I'll stick in my rotation myself, but it is a pretty solid shoe all round.
So my verdict then on the Hoka Challenger 7, I enjoyed it. I thought the ride was good across the road and the trail. And it's a happy shoe to run in. I think it's a sort of comfortable, happy shoe to go and do easy miles in. I don't find it particularly kind of soft, and I don't really feel like it soaks up that much more than the something like the Hoka Speedgoat 5. I don't think it's a better shoe than the Hoka Speedgoat 5. I kind of much prefer running in that shoe, and I think that shoe will do just about the same job as this shoe. Though I just don't think it's quite as versatile as the Speedgoat 5, and I don't think I'd choose it over that shoe that I think can do more on the trail than this Challenger 7, which I think maybe is a little bit restricted. But that said, I have enjoyed running in it. I think it's a perfectly solid shoe. I think it represents pretty good value for money in terms of, I reckon it's the durability. I think it's a shoe you'll enjoy running on the trails in, and if it copes with the road well, copes with the trails well, and if it was the only shoe on the planet, I'd happily recommend it. Price-wise, it's a toss-up here. I think the Hoka Torrent comes in a bit cheaper and will arguably do a similar job, maybe a little bit firmer. And yeah, I think if you're looking for something a little bit softer as well, maybe the New Balance Sierra latest generation comes in a little bit softer. Yeah, I think my verdict basically, good shoe, not amazing. Do wonder if it's really necessary in the kind of lineup of trail shoes that Hoka has. Is it doing a job that's markedly that different from some of them? I wouldn't say so, but I don't think you'd be disappointed if you bought it. I do think the Speedgoat 5 is a better shoe though.
That's our review of the Hoka Challenger 7. Let us know what you think in the comments below. Do you use a road to trail shoe like this in your rotation? Do you find them useful, or have you just found a road shoe with a decent outsole that you can use on those light trails? Please let us know in the comments below. Do like and subscribe, ring the little bell, and we'll see you next time.